Hello, how are you doing?
Very good, very good. Okay, so the floor is yours.
All right, let me go ahead and share my screen and then we'll jump in and get going. My name is Benjamin Harvey. I am the founder and CEO of AI Squared, but I'm also a professor at George Washington University, where I am the director of designing trustworthy AI systems. Today, we're going to talk more in depth and in detail about, how we're helping organizations create generative AI augmented experiences that organizations and customers are loving in this space. So a little bit about my background. So again, my name is Benjamin Harvey. I started off, with a degree in computer science, specifically looking at, how we can help organizations apply AI and machine learning algorithms in large-scale cancer genomics data sets. And that's what I got my PhD in. And after I finished my PhD, I did my postgraduate research at Harvard and MIT, a joint program for health and science technology. I went from the Harvard MIT area out in Boston to the National Security Agency. And at the National Security Agency, my last two positions, I was the head of data science for the Edward Snowden leaks, and I was also the chief of operations data science for the operations directorate. So in those particular positions, I first started off helping the National Security Agency understand, what were the equities in the millions of files that were taken out of the building by Edward Snowden. And I was the lead data scientist for running machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms across the forensics data sets that we discovered to really push the organization to mitigate some of the vulnerabilities that were exposed to some of the adversaries. But I also, in the position of chief of operations data science at the National Security Agency, was directly responsible for helping the organization understand not only how they create the technologies to support AI and ML at scale, but also from a process and people perspective, how do we create the internal processes, whether it's governance to compliance, really to ensure that, we can operate in a manner that allows us to increase the overall adoption of these AI technologies across organizations, right? Where, we're more than just deploying models, but we're actually integrating those models into the workflows of our workforce. So in that particular position, in that role, I saw tons of gaps. One of the biggest was, the inability of the federal government to really integrate AI and machine learning technologies inside of currently existing tools and applications. And that's where, the foundation of this particular company in AI Squared, that's what we were built based upon. I went and did a couple of years at, the Silicon Valley startup called Databricks, where my last couple of positions focused on, being a subject matter expert on the AI and ML side, but also, really supporting, growing business, particularly for AI and ML on the federal side of the house at Databricks. What you see here is really, some information that's associated with, the impact that we feel integrating generative AI technologies inside of the federal government space, but also an industry can actually have where ultimately in the federal government, it's more about supporting the analysts and the military warfighter. So the goal for us is how do we, from a commercial perspective, empower organizations to integrate generative AI and predictive AI into currently existing tools and applications so that we can really support more empowered data-driven decision-making. And really from an AI Squared perspective, here are some of our investors, including in New Enterprise Associates, but we're also, recognized globally for some of the achievements that we've had as well. All right, so thinking about some of our use cases, so our product, right, is really a platform that empowers product owners, analysts, data teams, and it really helps them, securely accelerate their AI projects. So both generative and predictive, as well as measuring their benefits And what we're doing, and what I'll be able to show you all with this technology, is we're embedding the AI and the generative AI inside of these applications without coding. Okay. And we'll look at, how the generative AI is helping us kind of build some of what we call these components based upon templates. But most importantly, is providing, the trust by iterating with the human in the loop, and then improving the AI and machine learning capabilities according to the accuracy and the performance by leveraging that feedback and other analytics to, tune those models to help them become more accurate. So we've started working with, a ton of customers in the space, all the way from financial services to cybersecurity to health and life sciences. But, most importantly, what we've been able to do is we've really been able to help organizations take AI and ML and start to embed those technologies inside of currently existing tools and applications. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to start with is really a little background on, the traditional OpenAI GPT training process, right? And the reason I want to draw parallels here is because a lot of organizations, as we talk to them in the early stages, don't understand how important it is not to just, build a database of vector embeddings and train or tune a model based upon those embeddings inside of a vectorized database, right? But they don't understand the value and the impact and the importance of having the human in the loop to provide feedback for the generative AI capabilities so that you can increase the accuracy and performance of that model over time. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about the training process and specifically spend a little bit of time on how these technologies are actually being tuned with the human in the loop, where they're providing feedback. And that's really what's powering the ability for a lot of these models to build additional question answer pairs that are really supporting the increased accuracy and performance of these models on these internally developed, organized, and used proprietary data sources, so that you can actually start to really prove some value for these generative AI technologies inside of an organization. So, we all understand, kind of the traditional training process that's associated with these large language models in this generative AI space, where, we're starting with the pre-training, where, for an example, there could be a model that has, 175 billion parameters that's being trained on vectorized database with, 300 billion tokens with a, 50K vocabulary size. And we're using, that to be able to empower us, to create our first iteration of the model, right? So it's purely, training based upon, a large, vectorized source of information. We have this huge model in this particular example, 175 billion parameters, as well as a vocabulary size of 50K. And we've been able to leverage that database across 300 billion tokens as well. Okay. And then the second step, is really what I want to dig into a little bit, right? So it's the fine tuning, right? Where you're, collecting data and you're fine tuning, where there's this reward, that's associated with, the information that you're gaining, and then using or optimizing, based upon the reinforcement learning, using things like a, PPO algorithm, for an example. Okay. So there's really two stages here. So it's the traditional kind of training process, but it's also the fine tuning. And what I really want to focus on is how AI squared is supporting some of the fine tuning and really demystifying, some of the areas associated with how do you go into an organization with an open source model and come out with the model that is trained and can help you, really start to answer some questions for a specific domain based upon data inside of an organization. So when you think about this fine tuning step, what a lot of organizations that we work with don't really understand initially is it's really how important it is to not just use that initial vectorized database that has the vocabulary and just use that directly for a model that you're going to push out into an organization. But the fine-tuning step is really what provided organizations like OpenAI, but also organizations that are using large language models up to date, the ability to start getting some really solid answers to provide their organization. So, when we think about the fine-tuning, there's a couple of different steps, right? So one of the steps that organizations use, and we empower organizations to do something very similar, is really based upon a prompt. The labeler then demonstrates the designed output, and then there's this data set for the supervised learning, and then, finally you have this STF model, right? So essentially what you're doing here is essentially based upon the response, I'm going to tell you if it was good or bad, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down. And if it was thumbs down, I'm going to provide you with a more of an answer for me as a SME that I feel was accurate, right? Or correct, given that particular response. If me as the SME determined that it was incorrect, okay? And then there's another step, right? For a lot of organizations, they say, hey, not only are we going to provide you with the right answer, right? We're also going to provide you with context, additional context for why the answer was wrong, okay? And organizations are using both of those types of information to retrain the model or tune the model. But also in the second step here, you can see that, you're using this STF model to provide additional answers, right? And those answers, instead of just providing one, you're providing multiple. And those multiple answers are being ranked, and you're using that ranking as you're using the reinforcement learning to tune the model as well, okay? So the big thing that you have to understand, and we're seeing this with a lot of customers, is that the initial, creation of the vectorized database and just tuning on the vectorized database is one thing, or just tuning on, just the embeddings that are from the underlying data across the organizational repositories is one thing, but building a really solid, not just a question answer pair, so that you can tune the model, question answer pairs that you can tune the model with, but also adding additional context from the users or the subject matter experts that are providing the labels so that you can increase the accuracy and performance over time as well. And not just doing this at one point in time, but doing this over the life cycle of the model that's being deployed inside of the organizations. And that's what we saw in financial services from a perspective of these organizations run observational studies, and these observational studies are continuously being ran throughout the lifetime of the model, okay? So the fine-tuning is what we're seeing as the most important piece of the puzzle over time to provide these organizations with the ability to get a high fidelity of quality in the answers that they're getting from these large language models. And a lot of organizations going in don't understand the power and the value of this, but AI Squared, what we do is we come in and we say, okay, not only are we going to integrate this large language model into your currently existing tools or applications, but we have to run observational studies to instrument the model, gather feedback, and watch the accuracy and performance improve over time. So what does this look like in an actual use case? So here's an example of a use case that we worked with a particular customer. And what we're doing here is we've done a couple of different things, right? And this is particularly in the cybersecurity domain. But what we're doing here is we're starting to gather information, right, that's associated with not just vectorized data, right, that we are gathering, from the repositories in the organization. We're also pulling in information from across the entire organization, right? So, from a cybersecurity perspective, this could be, IP information, hash information, domain information. It could be information about help documents. It could be other LLMs. It could be, vulnerability intelligence or threat intelligence, right? So this could be a number of different types of information that's being pulled from across, a cybersecurity organization, for an example, right? Now, not only do you need to understand the sources of information that you can feed to the large language model, but you also need to understand more about how are you going to gather that feedback, right, that we talked about to empower that fine tuning. You can increase the accuracy and the performance of that model over time, right? So really, we've got two ends of the spectrum. We've got sources of information, other models. These could be predictive models, or these could be other generative AI models, right, that you want to add into the sources, right, where you're powering the large language model and you're using it as an agent to be able to reach out to these sources, depending on if the model feels that it has the information necessary to provide a very solid response, okay? So first is, how do you empower the LLM to make connections to the sources of information that could really help it provide a solid response, okay? So that's one part of the problem. But there's another part of the problem specifically associated with the fine tuning. So what we did is we said, okay, all right, so from the final answer of the LLM, the generative AI capability, we're going to empower you to give it a thumbs up, thumbs down. If it is a thumbs down, we want you to provide additional context for why it was wrong, as well as the correct answer. We also want to help the large language model understand if it's actually grabbing the necessary information that could help it provide the best response. So as the subject matter experts provide information back to the data team, as well as the LLM, what we're doing is we're trying to gather different information that's associated with, okay, purely from a accuracy and performance perspective, right? How's the model doing? Okay. But also help us understand, are there any other sources of information that could have been used with this large language model that could have helped it provide a better response? Okay. So now we're getting into the guts of, are there any undocumented or unknown data sources that we can add to the LLM that could help it increase the accuracy and performance as well? Okay. But also relevancy, right? So we talk about, was the model timely? Was it relevant, right? We want to make sure that the results from the model are actionable, right? So we think about timeliness, relevancy, actionability, but also the context, right? Being able to add additional context that could help that could help the LLM second time around provide a better response as well, right? So we're gathering all this feedback and we're using that feedback with the model as part of that the tuning process to help increase the accuracy and performance over time. Okay. So what does this all kind of lead to, right? So if you think about many organizations and how they use large language models to date, they use them inside of the chat application. Okay. But what we're seeing as well is we're seeing a lot of organizations with the interest in, okay, how do I break this LLM outside of the chat application? Okay. So many of our use cases right now are associated with helping organizations take the insights that are associated with a traditional large language model and push them directly inside of currently existing tools and applications across the organization to support those, think about those analysts, those business users, those individuals on the front line that need those insights, but don't want to jump out of their workflows to be able to use a chatbot or chat application and have that conversational experience. They literally want the insights from a actionable perspective, a timeliness perspective, from a integration directly in their workflows perspective. They want it where they want it exactly where, when, and how they need them, when they want them, directly inside of their workflow. So on the AI squared side, another thing that we've worked really hard on is really, empowering organizations to think about the last mile of AI a little differently, right? So, think about how LLMs make a prediction and how that can be integrated into a currently existing tool or application. But also, right, how could you use the human in the loop, right? Similarly to how you use the human in the loop to actually gather additional insights directly within a chat application where it's thumbs up, thumbs down. If it's thumbs down, provide me with context, but also provide me with the right answer, but give me additional insights according to whether if the results were actionable, relevant, timely, contextualized, if they had the right sources of information within them, et cetera. So we're still gathering additional feedback, right, in those currently existing tools and applications. But what makes it really unique when you think about how you can start to provide generative AI insights inside of a currently existing tool or application, right? What you need that a lot of applications don't currently provide is really that content and the context, right? So the content associated with what are all the different sources of information that I could gain access to? And then from a context perspective, where are you at in your workflow, right? What web page are you on? What web application are you within? So getting that content as to what other sources of information exist that I don't currently know about or not currently aware of that could help me better answer this question, as well as that context as to, all right, what application am I in? If I'm a business user, what lead am I looking at? If I am a business user, help me understand where I am in my particular workflow in regards to turning a lead into an actual client. So that context is extremely important to empower the LLM to deliver insights that are actionable, relevant, timely, and contextualized that can ultimately support data-driven decision-making. All right, so when we think about this from how AI Squared's working with generative AI and doing augmentation and integration, right? So it's really about how can you augment the cognitive decision-making process of someone in a currently existing tool or application using the results from a large language model. And really where AI Squared comes in at is we've created a technology called LLM Link, right? And what it provides us with is the ability to discover those documented and undocumented data sources that could really empower the LLM to increase the accuracy in which it's providing responses, whether it's inside of a chat application or whether it's back into a currently existing tool or application inside the organization. Okay. So what we use is essentially a couple of different things, right? We use LLM Link to connect us to those documented and undocumented data sources. But we also use LLM Link to empower us to be able to make the connection to other models, to other data sources that really helps us fine-tune that model with regards to the fidelity of information that we are providing it to drive those responses. But at the same time, we use generative AI to help us create different experiences inside of the end user applications, right? So we're not only powering the LLM to discover new data sources, but we're also allowing the LLM to create code based upon our templates that we're using to create these very novel personalized experiences for different users inside of these currently existing applications as well. Okay. So it's more than just using, documents that you vectorize inside of a database from the embeddings to be able to power the LLM. It is the context and the content. So we're also grabbing and harvesting from the DOM an understanding of where the user is, what the user is doing, that implicit and explicit behavior, as well as the content from where they are in their workflow, right? So implicitly, what page they're on, how long they've been on that page. Explicitly, what they may be liking, what they may be sharing. All of that information really empowers AI Squared to deliver these insights directly back inside of these currently existing tools and applications, okay? So we use LLM Link to help us understand where those documented and undocumented data sources are, but also these could be, as we mentioned before, these could be predictive AI capabilities or generative AI capabilities that we're pulling together. And then we use the generative AI capability within AI Squared to then create code that can create these really custom and personalized experiences in these currently existing tools and applications that we're embedding as well. And then finally, what we're doing is we're then pushing the content and the context, right, from the end user application back into the LLM to really help us personalize what type of responses we're providing. All right, so one really cool example. This comes from one of our financial services customers. So one really cool example is, we've got a use case where in financial services we're working with sales account managers or sales executives, and they have a list of potential clients or leads. And one of the challenges was really, how do we start to get a high fidelity of information that's associated with that particular lead that could help us ultimately make a decision or drive a decision on how we can communicate with this lead to ultimately turn them and he or she into a customer. Okay. So starting off, this organization didn't have a lot of, didn't have a lot of insights that were complex enough to really drive making a decision for that lead to help turn them into a customer. So what AI Squared did is we used those key components of what I showed you as far as that augmentation and integration. So gathering the context and the content, right, from the actual field of view, harvesting that from the application that particular user is working within. Using LLM Link to drive the discovery of documented, undocumented, as well as other AI, generative AI and predictive AI capabilities. Using our generative AI technology inside the platform to create custom experiences that's associated with the insights from the sources of data, the insights from the models that are actually being used. We're creating custom experiences and visualizations inside of the application that can support really helping that sales account manager or sales executive have a great experience learning about how to turn Alice Allison into a customer. But also the final aspect of that was grabbing feedback, right? So you're only as good as, from an LLM perspective, as the feedback that you can give over time to power the tuning of the model as well. So what you see here are really two different aspects. One aspect is we're gathering, using LLM Link to reach out to those different sources of information, right? So one source of information here, we have a propensity score where it's high, medium, and low, score from probability from 0 to 1. But we also have a couple of models that do core and non-core product recommendations that we use the LLM to reach out to. We also have a database, data warehouses associated with web and event signals that the LLM reached out to. And we use generative AI to create some code that we embedded directly inside the application that helps you have a really awesome experience of how the results from the different models that are being generated through the large language model are being integrated inside of this application, okay? But remember, we talked about the tuning piece. So how do you increase the accuracy and the performance of the large language model over time? Then AI Squared works directly within the confounds of feedback that we overlay inside of the application, and we provide you with the ability to start providing feedback on the experience that was generated by the generative AI. So what you're seeing is a totally new experience that the LLM is powering. So how do you customize that? You have to continuously tune it. So we're providing that user inside of this ecosystem with the ability to say, okay, for Alice Allison, that was great that the actual integration for Alice Allison was on this page and we had this score, but I'd like the LLM to provide something a little different. So we can associate a certain template with how the LLM would create a circle chart or a bar chart or a bar chart or a pie chart. And we can empower the LLM to create different experiences based upon these templates, okay? So what we're doing here is we're using all those different aspects with the ultimate goal of augmenting the currently existing experience inside the application, leveraging LLM Link to drive the discovery of documented and undocumented AI capabilities and data sources. We're also gathering that feedback to empower the tuning. We're also sourcing information directly from the field of view so that we're harvesting insights so that we can get context and additional content. And we're using all of that together to really support data-driven decision-making for an example, sales account managers or sales executives in financial services or consumer or packaged goods with some of the companies that we're working with. All right, so kind of pulling it all together and wrapping it up. So when you think about kind of what are the different pieces of the puzzle to empower this. So what we have is essentially a way to empower our LLM link technology to reach out to the different sources, right? So these sources could be, model files. The sources could be model API endpoints, or they could be data sources across an organization. And we've seen our LLM, and it has the ability inside of our generative AI technology inside of the platform to reach out to any one of those different sources to find those documented and undocumented data sources, and be able to add them as part of the results that we're embedding inside of these applications. But at the same time, as we talked about, we have the auto tuning, the feedback that provides you with the capability to start gathering some of the data for auto tuning, where you can set a threshold of feedback and say, hey, after we hit this threshold, I want you to kick off a retrain so that we can tune this model based upon all the feedback that we gathered up to this point. And then it's really the engine, right? So the engine that we talked about, which is powering the discovery of those different capabilities for AI and generative AI, where it could be a predictive model, like we talked about in the use case before, where we showed the LLM reached out to a predictive AI model that did a sales opportunity score for a lead. It also reached out to a predictive model that did product recommendations. But we're also using generative AI to customize those really cool experiences. So that code that was generated in regards to those dashboards came directly from a generative AI capability, where we are using a template to create new code that empowers you to create like a bar chart or a pie chart or a circle chart, whatever it may be. And we're using that, and that's what's being embedded directly inside the applications. We have a workspace where low code, no code, depending on if you're a data scientist or depending on if you are for an example, a product owner, you can build out these experiences inside of new applications in minutes. And then finally, right, we've seen a lot of success from organizations that want to test different experiences across the organization with different sets of users. So they do A/B testing, where they create an experience for one group of users using AI squared, and they create a separate experience for another group of users using AI squared as well. So I'll stop there, and I'll open the floor up for questions, but really appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what we're seeing in the space and how things are shaping up, and looking forward to engaging with those who are interested in more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. This has been absolutely incredible. I think I have about 1,000 questions for you, and I'm gonna try to keep it to the top 500 or so. But let me start with a couple of questions from. I mean, like, my mind has been racing ever since you were saying things about the NSA, and then so I have questions stemming from then to all the way into like the details of AI squared and what you guys are building now. I mean, there's just like so much that you touched on. I'm gonna start with a couple of questions that folks from the chat posted. So the first one I see here is from Rex. He says, what's the process for then using the feedback to refine tune? When do you decide it's the right time to go through that process and eat the cost again? And I believe that you addressed a little bit of that sort of like towards the end, but can you perhaps give a more complete answer to this?
Yeah, great question. By the way, so if you think about when a lot of organizations grab an open source model for the first time and they're doing some tuning based upon the original open source model that they brought into the organization, they use two different types of data sets. They traditionally use, so if you think about Databricks Dolly, right? Databricks Dolly open source not only the model, but they open source this data set of question answer pairs that they use to actually train the model as well. So when we pull the data inside of an organization, we're creating it in two different ways. One way is just straightforward, like a vector database based upon word embeddings of the internal organizational repositories. That's one. But what we do is we structure the feedback as question answer pairs, right? And those question answer pairs we use with the vectorized database, and together the feedback with that we construct as question answer pairs with the vectorized database, we use those both to actually retrain the model. But that's a very great question.
The next one is we have from Lucas here. Do you have concerns about data quality for the feedback loop? So simplest example being that an optional thumbs up, thumbs down usually has more thumbs down since users are more likely to complain when their workflow breaks than to compliment you when it works well, since they just proceed with the workflow instead anyway. How do you handle this sort of imbalance?
Yeah, great question again. So what we do is we do have a hierarchy of people that are providing feedback. So we run a study, right? And in this study that we run, it's called an observational study, and we run that with organizations. The organizations inside the observational study have subject matter experts that have the expertise to provide the feedback, right? But it's a very controlled study. So when we retrain, we're retraining on the data from the study, from the subject matter experts that we have trust in that are going to be able to help us get a very high level of quality in the feedback. But we don't limit the feedback just to those individuals. So we also use more of like a crowdsourcing mechanism for other individuals in the organization that are providing feedback as well, where we can flag certain items because 10 users said the same thing about that one specific thing, right? And that flags certain things for us so that we can understand that we need to make improvements. But specifically for the study, right, that you have to continuously run over time, right? You can't just deploy this LLM and think it's going to just automatically just be great for 6 years, right?
Sure.
You have to tune it over time. So what we do is we run a controlled study, a certain number of subject matter experts that we validated and verified, and then we kind of use those two different aspects of crowdsourcing and an observational study together.
You sort of like, okay, it seems like you're taking you're deeply integrating into their workflow and into their company. This is not just like, okay, use this product, play around with our sandbox, you're done. You feel like this is almost, you simply cannot roll out AI in the way that it seems like you're imagining you should with this approach.
Exactly. And the reality in what organizations are seeing is that they're trying. They're literally trying right now. And the first organization on the cybersecurity side that we worked with, they've tried, and they got to a point where they were like, okay, we're training this model on, tons and tons of data in the organization. We went from open source to fine tune on our data in our organization, and the model still sucks. How can we get it better? And the reality, the come to Jesus moment was really, hey, look, like you guys have to embed some processes that you can start to get a more fine-grained fidelity in the amount of feedback that you can get. Because what organizations don't see is OpenAI spent a lot of time and resources gathering that feedback, right? And doing that fine-tuning. And organizations now think, hey, I can bring this open source model in, and I don't have to do the level of fine-tuning that OpenAI did to be able to train ChatGPT. I'm just going to be able to use a vector database and get a hugely accurate model. So it's really two things we saw. You have to do the fine-tuning. You have to run these. You have to continuously do the fine-tuning. And the other thing is you can't try to boil the ocean in the first iteration of the model, right? Use the LLM to bring in other models, other LLMs that you might need to use, but kind of stay more focused initially, and then bring in other sources of information, other predictive models, other LLMs over time to kind of expand the breadth of the questions that you can answer with your capability.
Yeah, I'm very curious about who internally has the motivation to sort of like weather that kind of project, because it's one thing if you say, fine, let's just bring this, ChatGPT is kind of cool, we'll plug it in, I know how to, call some REST APIs. And then as soon as you have some moment of disillusionment, now there is much more staying power that seems to be necessary, right? So somebody in the organization has to say, well, no, this is actually worth doubling down on. Who are those people?
Oh my goodness, great question. So here's the thing. It's a lot of times it's motivated by the cost of some of these studies in the LLM world, right? So here's what we see. We see organizations, they spend millions of dollars testing, evaluating LLMs, and they never get anything in the production that anyone is ever willing to actually use on a day-to-day basis, right? So we've had CEOs that say, hey, like my organization just spent $10 million and we don't have anything to show for it, but a bunch of models that have been fine-tuned, and they're sitting on the shelf, right? So we come in and we say, hey, if you want to get to that next level and you actually want to push out a production level product, or you actually want to use something at a production level inside the organization, here's what you have to do. But at the same time, there has to be an understanding because you've got the people that are seeing the money being spent. But you also have to have someone who is very critically, understanding the importance of getting these capabilities into the hands of the business users, right? So from the data science side, traditionally data scientists don't care much about, after I throw it over the fence, who uses it and how they use it. So there's a connectivity from like these product owners, right?
Yeah.
Who own the AI technologies as they exist inside of some of these currently existing products and tools.
Yeah.
Combination of the people seeing the money spent and the people that own the fact that the technologies need to be embedded into the workflows of the business users as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So you get these so the product owners, that's on one hand. And it feels to me like probably more and more product owners are feeling the allure of pulling in LLMs into or just AI in general, perhaps just like as they see it through like the lens of ChatGPT and whatever, into their products. But that seems to have been a relatively recent trend. You're also talking about, work that you guys did in the Snowden case. And this is like early 2010s that we're talking about. How do you compare sort of like the motivations back then to say, well, let's pull in AI and machine learning, a relatively recent sort of addition to the zeitgeist at the time. What you're saying now, I imagine like an enormous amount has changed in the mindset, but is there any way you can describe that difference?
Yeah, great question. I think this is such a great question. So some years back, right, the motivation was, the thesis was, how can I get predictive AI integrated inside of currently existing tools and applications? But over the past year, the thesis has completely changed to generative AI, right? Because organizations want to scrap the chat applications, and they're like, hey, I want to completely start to integrate these generative AI technologies inside of the workflows of the people that need them the most. Now, during the Snowden case, from a predictive AI perspective, the feedback was really important as well, right? Because the feedback helps you understand, for an example, I'll tell you this, there are very cool ways that you can use feedback from a predictive AI perspective to understand what individuals are doing from an AI perspective, right, that they may not supposed to be doing, right? So, what models are you using? What information are you curious about as you're leveraging these different AI capabilities, right? So there's a lot of important and useful information that you can gain as you're gathering feedback, right, from users in their workflows directly from a insider threat perspective, right? So I'll say that. So back in the day, I'll say this, our technology was really dual-hatted from a insider threat perspective, but also, right, from a traditional, how can I integrate predictive AI into the workflows? But that feedback gives you a lot of insights into how your organization is using AI and machine learning.
Insider threat, can you say more? What does that mean?
Yeah, so the insider threat, right? I want you guys to think about, this is really, how individuals in the so understanding the behavior. So user entity and behavioral analytics, right? This is where a lot of organizations are trying to use to be able to determine if someone is doing things that are of nefarious activities inside of the organization, right? So early days, AI Squared was really, looking at how individuals were using AI and machine learning. So the feedback was being used for us to be able to determine, all right, if you're using predictive AI and you're looking at a certain model inside of an organization that you shouldn't be looking at, then how can I understand that feedback to really be able to determine if you have the correct access, authorizations, and authentications if your behavior doesn't match, right, exactly what you're doing at a certain point in time as well. So we kind of use it in a dual-headed manner, also for insider threat, but also from a predictive AI capability as well.
Guys,
Hey,
what's the? I just wanted to jump on here. I'm about to go on to stage 1, but I wanted to say that Benjamin Harvey is a fucking legend. I love this guy. I'll see you later.
He messaged that in the group chat, I think, somewhere earlier. So you know he's sincere, and this is the moments before he gets on the stage. This is what he feels about that. Benjamin, I'm sure you've made quite an impression on him. And look at me, I want to just keep you here for as long as I can. I'm continuing to grill you on questions. The other thing is, I have no filter. I'm just going to keep asking you questions until you tell me. See, ask you some of these questions anymore. I prepared. Let's see. I do have like dozens of questions here that I might find you on the Slack later on. But let's see if there is something that you know what okay. I know we got to wrap up, but I do want to ask you something like this. You seem to have been talking about both like working in the federal government, agencies, financial services too. Like it seems like you're sort of like spanning the space here of like the different companies that you could be working with. You don't seem to have been limiting yourself. That being said, it feels to me like while you have a product and a technology that you're building, you're also very hands-on working with those clients, right? So they may or may not, I don't know if internally you call them a client or a customer or a user, right? It seems to me like when you cater to, let's say, like the federal government,
yep,
do you feel like having an only product approach is the best way to go? Do you need to do like a mix of products and services? How should companies that are sort of like product first companies think about services when catering to buyers like the federal government?
Man, that's such a great question. So what I'll show you, I had a picture of one of the awards that I won. It was in a presentation, but this is it right? So this is the 2017, right? So this was for some of the work that we did for the Edward Snowden leaks. This is the 2017 top award for a counterintelligence professional in the United States in 2017, right? So to answer your question, you almost need it's pedigree, number one, right? Because the federal government is so hard to break into, right? As far as how do you start to do services or even bring a product inside of the organization. So you almost, for us, we were very fortunate because I had the background and the experience of working in the federal government for over 10 years.
Yeah.
I had done, so much work at the highest levels in the federal government. So that really helped, right? So you have to have someone that understands acquisition processes, but also has tons of connections that can help you kind of get into the federal government. Because I wish I could say that you can kind of knock on the door and find the right organization that understands the value of your technology to be able to get in. But it's really about relationships, but it's also about connecting the dots and understanding like the underlying mission objectives and connecting your technology to those mission objectives. But the only way that you have an understanding of those mission objectives is you have to have intimate knowledge of the organization, and you have to have intimate knowledge of the strategy from some of the leaders in the organization as well to kind of map your technologies to. So going in, you do want to have a combination of both, because the federal government doesn't pay for products, right? Like they pay for butts and seats. So the opportunity is to go in and say, hey, look, I've got a technology that can augment the workforce, but as I put butts and seats, I'm going to add this technology with it so that they can become more, more efficient and effective in how they're actually building things or providing, insights for the military warfighter and the analysts. But at the same time, I'm not saying that this technology is going to replace, adding butts and seats. Like it's going to literally still empower us to bring more workers into the organization, but we're just using our product to augment. So we have kind of like a dual approach in the federal government. We're going to bring in, additional contractors to help support mission. We're going to augment them with our product as well.
For which companies does it make sense then to try to break into the federal government? Is it, do you have do you need to just be like mission driven? Is it also a lucrative business to get into? Like, is the market size sufficient? Like, how do you kind of reconcile all these different, sometimes conflicting incentives when you make that?
Great question. So I'll give you an example. I know a company that does 500 million ARR just with the National Security Agency.
Jesus.
Just with the National Security Agency. That's one company, right? So, and they provide a technology. That's just one company. So the point is that the opportunity is lucrative, but at the same time, it is a huge commitment from a startup perspective to try to go into the federal government without having a ton of connections, understand the acquisition process, and being able to very succinctly go into an organization and connect to a program of record. When I say program of record, it's like an organization that has dollars that have been allocated for 3, 4, 5 years out, and you can connect to that budget. So you have to have that knowledge. Otherwise, you can be spinning your wheels for a couple of years, wasting the money that you could be going after industry dollars and bringing into the organization to try to win just your first federal opportunity. So there are programs like the SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research grants, that you can go after from the federal government perspective to get you some non-dilutive funding. So I would say go after those first while you're trying to figure out how to find customers in the federal government, and use both of those avenues together in conjunction with going after commercial dollars to be able to see if you can do work in the federal government.
Benjamin, it was a massive pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for your time and wisdom. Yeah.
You got it. Whenever you guys need me, I'll be back. And it's an honor to be here because I love talking to you guys. And anytime you need me, let me know, and I'll be the first person to support whatever you guys are doing in the future.
Will do. Thank you very much, Benjamin, and good luck with AI Squared.
Okay. All right. Talk to you later, man. Thank you.
Right.